Okay, so we'll start with today's session. It's on tuberculosis. It's one of the most important communicable diseases in our country and worldwide also. Under ICD-10, it is classified from A15.0 to A15.9, and in the ICD-11, in the draft formation, it is 1B 10.0 to 1B 10.Z. So in the first part, we'll deal with the epidemiology of the disease. We'll touch upon the recent advances, then diagnosis part, and the program part will be covered in the next session by Dr. Varisha. So why this particular disease is a concern? Because India has the highest estimated burden of tuberculosis infection globally, with nearly 35 to 40 crore Indian population having tuberculosis infection, of which 26 lakh people are estimated to develop tuberculosis annually, which is approximately 1/4 of the global TB cases. Once the infection occurs, the bacilli remain in the form of a latent infection inside the person, and there is 10% lifetime risk of that person developing the disease after this infection. So in majority of us, this infection is occurring as a latent phase of infection. Worldwide, approximately 30 to 40% of the people are infected. But infection doesn't mean that the person has the disease. It only means that the person has been exposed to the bacilli, Mycobacterium tuberculosis, and this infection is in a latent phase. Now, the transmission most of the time occurs through airborne route. So through coughing, sneezing, the transmission happens. But there are other modes also. The high burden of malnutrition, diabetes, HIV, alcohol, and smoking, they make the person more prone to develop the disease. And many times these are happening as comorbid conditions. Now, where do we stand? The global situation in 2020, the Sustainable Development Goals and TB strategy. The targets for reductions in the TB incidence rates, death rates, and catastrophic costs. These are the main three targets given in the SDGs and TB strategy. The target is that we should reduce 20% the incidence rate if we consider 2015 as the base year. So by 2020, we were supposed to reduce the incidence of TB by 20%, but we have achieved the reduction only 9%. In terms of mortality, the target was to reduce 35% of the mortality compared to 2015, but we could achieve only 14% reduction. And the catastrophic cost to the patient because of tuberculosis should have been zero by 2020. But we could reduce it only by 49%. So still majority of the patients are facing a catastrophic cost. And what do we mean by catastrophic cost? That they are spending around 20 to 30% of their total income on the treatment of tuberculosis. So the earlier slide was showing the global report. Now this one is for Southeast Asia. So even lesser reduction is there in Southeast Asia compared to global reduction. There the reduction was more, but here in Southeast Asia only 8.7% reduction is there, and mortality only 10% reduction. Now, many a times we have seen that if the person are having HIV, diabetes, smoking, or alcohol use is there, or the undernutrition is there, then the chances of tuberculosis are higher. So there is an association between these things. And there are certain social determinants also which increase the tendency for occurrence of tuberculosis more. So in 2019, the global estimated incidence of TB was 10 million cases, of which 7.1 million were diagnosed cases. So rest 2.9 million were the cases which were supposed to be there somewhere in this world, but they could not be detected, and that's why they could not be put on treatment. So this is known as the gap of 2.9 million cases, and approximately 17% of the total missing cases are in India. So we should try to, improve the case detection more so that we can approach all the patients of tuberculosis, and we should start their treatment as soon as possible, because these cases, if not treated at the right time, might infect other. So a single active case of tuberculosis may infect approximately 15 healthy people in a year. But if we start with the tuberculosis treatment within 48 hours, the infectivity or the transmission stops by 90% within 48 hours. There is no single drug available to treat tuberculosis. The bacilli tend to develop resistance due to various mutations. And as such, tuberculosis is catabolic in nature. It leads to malnourishment and cachexia. There is high direct and indirect cost to the person or to the patients, leading to poverty and impoverishment to individual and their families subsequently. And those people who are poor, who are living in overcrowded places, who are ignorant about the diseases, they are the ones who have the highest burden also. So it's a vicious cycle that poor are getting more tuberculosis, and tuberculosis makes them even poorer. And that's why the third target of catastrophic cost has been included in this, because we already know that it affects the poorest people. Now 70% of the TB patients in the age group 15 to 54 years are in the productive age group. This is the most economically productive age group, but if they are affected, then it means that they lose their productive days of life. There is high social cost, and many times discrimination is there. So a lot of campaigns are being done by Government of India especially to remove this discrimination. 1 in every 3 person living with tuberculosis experiences catastrophic cost, and 21% of the total patients living with tuberculosis, they need distress financing for their treatment, for their food, for their families, because they are not able to earn. Private sector offers approximately 40% of the services as per NFHS survey. Now recently, last year, we have changed the name of the program against tuberculosis from Revised National Tuberculosis Control Program to National Tuberculosis Elimination Program. And why this happened? Because India has committed to end TB by 2025, which is 5 years ahead of the SDG goal of ending tuberculosis by 2030. So to intensify the fight in alignment with this ambition and to accelerate the momentum towards the ultimate goal, an appropriate and representative change was required. So from RNTCP to NTP, the name has been changed. This is the evolution of our National Tuberculosis Elimination Program. We were one of the first countries who started with a National Tuberculosis Program in 1962. We continued with this program for approximately 30 years, and in 1992 we started with a survey. because the achievement of target was not as it was expected. So in 1992 onward, there was some changes in the program, initially at pilot level, that is at a small level in certain districts. But in 1997, we increased its outreach and we changed the name from NTP to Revised National Tuberculosis Control Program. And DOTS was the main strategy under that program. DOTS is the Directly Observed Treatment Short Course Therapy. And there was a paradigm shift in the whole program. We'll discuss about this later. In 2007, HIV TB and programmatic management of drug-resistant TB was started. In 2012, Nikshay was launched. It's a web-based platform where we, enter the details of the patients. In 2020, the program has been changed to National Tuberculosis Elimination Program. So in 1992, when we did the situational analysis, we saw that there were managerial weaknesses in the program. Over-reliance was there on the X-rays. There was frequent interruption of the supply of drugs, and low rates of treatment completion were there. Approximately 30% of the total patients were diagnosed, and of these, only 30% could actually complete the required drug regime. So effectively, only 10% of the patients were getting the complete treatment. That's why the program was not doing good. So in 1997, we started with the Revised National Tuberculosis Control Program, and DOTS was the strategy. Under that, we had designated microscopy centers at every 1 lakh population. At every 5 lakh population, there were tuberculosis units. And above that, district tuberculosis centers were there. And at TB units, the final decisions regarding tuberculosis patient could be taken. So there was decentralization of the diagnosis and treatment services. And here the key indicators were that treatment success rate was to be achieved 85% and case detection of 70%. These were the two main objectives of the RNTCP program, and we could actually successfully achieve both of them. From 1990 to 2015, Millennium Development Goals were set to halt and begin reversal of incidence of TB by 2015. The indicators were reduce prevalence and death by 50% between 1990 and 2015. In 2006, the Stop TB strategy came. In 2007, HIV-TB collaboration was started. Programmatic management of drug-resistant TB was started. Involvement of private providers and NGOs were also involved. And medical colleges were also roped in for patient care, training, and research. In 2012 to 17, National Strategic Plan was laid down, having an objective to achieve 90% notification rate of tuberculosis and to achieve 90% success rate for new TB and 85% for retreatment cases. To improve the successful outcome of DRTB, to improve outcomes in private sector, and to achieve decreased morbidity and mortality of HIV-TB. In 2012, the TB was made notifiable disease. Nikshay was launched for notification and surveillance, and we banned the sero-based diagnostic tests also. 2015 to 30, Sustainable Development Goals were laid down. Target 3.3 is to end epidemic of TB, malaria, and neglected tropical diseases and combat hepatitis, waterborne diseases, and other communicable diseases. So here the target under SDG is 2030, while NTB strategy has a target of 2035, but in India we have set a target of 2025. So these are the targets. That reduction in TB incidence should happen like this. By 2020, there should be 20% reduction. By 2025, 50%, and by 2030, 80% reduction in incidence should be there. While in case of TB deaths, mortality should reduce by 35% by 2020, 75% by 2025, and 90% by 2030. And catastrophic cost should be zero by year 2020. These are the baseline indicators of 2015 and how we are supposed to achieve them. TB incidence rate, it was 217 and we wanted to reduce it to 142 by 2020, 77 and 44 in 23 and 25. These are for India National Strategic Plan 2017 to 25. Then mortality, it should reduce from 32 present to 15 by 2020, 6 by 2013 or 23, and 3 by 2025. You can see the upper line. This is the TB incidence rate. At 2015, it was around 217, and we wanted it to reduce by 142 by 2020. But definitely we are well short of the target, and we need to take some urgent measures to decrease the further incidence. This brown colored line is the TB notification rate. So it has started showing betterment. And the blue line, this is the TB mortality. So from 40, we have reduced it to somewhat 32. But reduction should be more, as we have seen. So National Strategic Plan, it has the objectives to build, strengthen, and sustain, prevent the emergence of TB, early identification of presumptive TB, and equitable access. Now coming to the history part. So that was regarding the recent changes in the program and what different objectives we have in our mind while we are controlling this situation. And the greater details will be taught to you in the next session. Now come back to the history of tuberculosis. On March 24, in 1882, Dr. Robert Koch announced to a small group of scientists at University of Berlin Institute of Hygiene that he had discovered the TB bacillus. At that time, TB was raging throughout the Europe and Americas and causing death of 1 out of every 7 people. So Koch's discovery opened the way towards diagnosing and curing tuberculosis, because till then nobody knew the exact cause of tuberculosis. After 100 years, on 1982, on the 100th anniversary of Robert Koch's presentation, the International Union Against Tuberculosis and Lung Disease, IUATLD, they proposed that 24th March be proclaimed as an official World TB Day. So this is one of the 7 official global public health days. So every year there is a theme to create more awareness about tuberculosis on this particular day. The theme for World TB Day 2021 was "The Clock is Ticking." And it conveys the sense that world is running out of time to act on the commitments to end TB made by global leaders. And what are these commitments? The 3 things which we saw earlier, that we want to reduce the incidence, we want to reduce the mortality, we want to reduce the catastrophic cost by 2025 in India and worldwide by 2030. Now these are some of the main indicators based on which you can quantify the disease. Tuberculosis is a little peculiar in one sense that here we are talking of infection and we are talking of disease. These are 2 separate entities. As I've told you that 40% of the population is infected, but that doesn't mean that 40% of the population is having a disease. So that's why these indicators are very important to understand. Prevalence of cases. What do we mean by that? Prevalence as such means the existence of all the cases, new as well as old, which are present at a particular time period or time moment. But when we are talking about in case of tuberculosis, a case means number of AFB smear positive cases divided by media population into 1000. But as such, prevalence of disease should include the smear positive patients, smear negative patients, extra pulmonary patients, relapse cases, default cases, MDR cases, all they should be part of the prevalence of the diseases. But when we are talking about in terms of program point of view, the case means a smear positive case. Now a similar term is prevalence of infection. So infection as such we cannot detect by any other test except tuberculin test. And tuberculin test has its own limitations, that it cannot identify whether this is an active infection or whether it is because of the immunization. So we cannot be sure about the active infection. It just tells you about whether the tuberculin positivity is there or not. In India and worldwide also, the range is 30 to 40%. Incidence of infection. So in the earlier slide, we saw the tuberculin positives in media population. But if we see the new tuberculin converts in 1 year divided by total tuberculin negative population into 100, this will give you the incidence of infection. That is, out of the total tuberculin negative people, how many have developed the infection within a span of 1 year. This is incidence of infection, and this is also known as annual risk of infection, ARI. In India, the overall ARI is 1.5%. And if we divide into rural and urban, in rural areas it is 1.3, and in urban areas it is 2.2%. So this many people get the new infection per year. Why is it more in urban areas? Because of overcrowding. In most of the metro cities, there's a huge number of population and overcrowding is there, and the number of people who are living in slums with unsanitary conditions, the number of resettlement colonies. So because of overcrowding and because of the migrant population, the risk of infection is higher in urban areas. The incidence of disease. So earlier was the incidence of infection, but incidence of disease. It means number of new AFB smear positives in 1 year divided by total susceptible population into 1 lakh. In absolute numbers, 26.4 lakh people develop tuberculosis disease in India. The incidence for HIV/TB is separate. Incidence for these are given separately. The mortality is 32. Now prevalence of drug-resistant tuberculosis cases. Number of cases with drug resistance divided by total cases into 100. TB mortality rate, number of deaths due to tuberculosis divided by total medical population into 1 lakh. Now coming to magnitude of problem globally, we have seen some of these, that 10 million new cases of TB occur every year, of which 5.7 million are among males and 3.2 million among females, 1.1 among children. 1.5 million people died from TB and additional 0.4 million deaths in TB associated with HIV. TB remain in the top 10 causes of death worldwide. Over 95% of the TB deaths occur in low and middle income countries. Poor communities and vulnerable groups are the most affected, but this airborne disease is a risk to all. Globally, estimated 1 million cases and 1 lakh deaths occur among children annually. We have seen some spectacular results in tuberculosis control in developed countries. An interesting finding is that the decline in TB cases started long before the vaccine or the chemotherapy became available. So what led to this spectacular improvement in disease condition is the overall development. So better is the socioeconomic status, lesser are the tuberculosis incidence and prevalence. From 1900 to 1980, within a span of 80 years, the death rate in US because of tuberculosis declined from 199 to 0.5. So you can say almost 398 times reduction in death occurred in US by 1980. So you can see how far we are lagging behind the developed countries. Southeast Asia region, they account for 44% of the global incidence. India and Indonesia, they have the largest number of cases, 23% and 10% globally. And treatment rate is more than 88% since 2009. So in dots, the treatment success is quite good. Now, if you compare the high income, middle, low income and India, the incidence in high income is 9. Now compare it with India, 193. And mortality rate as low as 2, while in India we are struggling with a rate of 32. So for the last 5 years, the upper portion you can see, this is the reported cases from private sector. So their share is also increasing. It means the notification rate is improving from the private sector also. So we have the highest TB burden globally, 1/4 of total global cases, 2/3 of the Southeast Asia region cases. We account for 24% of the global incidence. So there is a repetition of these cases, these facts, and in some books you might find little different figures also. ARI is 1.5% and there is 10% lifetime of disease. 5,000 people develop tuberculosis every day and approximately 1,000 people die of tuberculosis daily. A sputum smear positive case can infect 10 to 15% per year, 40% population infected. More people die of tuberculosis than any other infectious disease. TB kills more women than all maternal causes put together. More than 3 lakh children are drop out from the schools annually because many times children themselves they have tuberculosis or their parents are having tuberculosis, so the family is having tough time. More than 1 lakh women are rejected by their families. Now you can see the social impact of the disease. These women, because they are not the bread earners and they become liability to the families, they are rejected from their families. So in a patriarchal society, we can see such atrocities happening just because of simple infectious disease which is totally curable. That's why it is so important for our country. More than 17 crore work days are lost. And if you multiply it by even minimum wages, you will see how much economic loss we are suffering because of tuberculosis. TB may create more orphans than any other infectious disease. 1/3 of the total female infertility is because of tuberculosis. So these are some of the facts regarding the tuberculosis burden. The mortality rates, though declining, but the rate of decline is not that satisfactory, which we want to achieve. Nowadays, severe forms of the disease are quite less common compared to the earlier days, maybe because of the vaccination and better diagnostic facilities available. If we see the natural history of the disease, that is, if we do not do any kind of intervention, what will happen? That if a person develops this infection, if he is exposed, he will have 10% lifetime risk of developing disease, tuberculosis disease. And 50 to 80% of this conversion from infection to disease happens within first 2 years of getting the exposure. In HIV patients, the risk of infection to disease increases 50 to 60%. Now, if suppose there are 100 patients of pulmonary tuberculosis, and if they are untreated, in 1 year, what will happen? 22% will become sputum negative of their own, 16% would die, and 62% would continue to be sputum smear positive. So you can see the mortality rate is also high, and these 62% of the cases, they will continue to spread the infection to other persons, and each case has the potential to spread the infection to 10 to 15 persons per year. So that's why we need to break this chain of transmission. If we talk about the types of tuberculosis, majority of it is pulmonary tuberculosis, approximately 85%, and rest is the extrapulmonary tuberculosis, where most common is the lymph node involvement, followed by pleura, then abdomen, bone, joint, etc., etc. Now you can see the proportion of extrapulmonary cases. Majority of the cases, almost 50%, is having lymph node tuberculosis, followed by 30% as pleural effusion, then abdominal, bone, meningitis, and others. And literally all the body organs are susceptible for tuberculosis. The source of infection is either the human cases or the bovine cases of tuberculosis. Infective material, we say that, is sputum. Mode of infection is droplet infection or droplet nuclei infection, and fomites do not generally transmit the infection. Now, what do we mean by a droplet? When we are coughing, when we are sneezing, when we are talking, number of droplets are formed, which come out from the nose and from the mouth majorly. So when they are freshly coming out of the mouth, they are droplets. Majority of them, they tend to settle down on the area around that person within a span of 3-4 meter to 3-4 feet to 6 feet. That's why we maintain the distance when we're talking about this COVID-19. So that much reach is there for the droplets, but droplets are a little heavier. In dry and hot conditions, what happens many times that these droplets, they tend to lose their humidity, their water content, so their weight becomes less, and they convert from droplet to droplet nuclei. And droplet nuclei are even more harmful because droplets will definitely tend to settle down to the earth quickly, but droplet nuclei, because they have lost their weight, they are very light in weight, so they keep suspended in the air for weeks altogether. And if there is no cross ventilation within that room where the person is coughed, where this droplet have converted into droplet nuclei, they may be there for many weeks, and the active infective bacilli might be there in these droplet nuclei. So you can see it is a airborne infection either through droplet or droplet nuclei. But fomites, what are fomites? These are the inanimate objects which might be having the infectious agent. So door handles, mouse, mobile phones, these are all can be called as fomites. But the fomites are not the route of transmission because it's a airborne infection. It has to go to the lungs. Okay. So if the person is sharing the room, if the person is sharing utensils, etc., it is not that much of a risk if cough hygiene is maintained, if proper treatment has been started. Now, as I've told you already, chemotherapy, that is starting the anti-tuberculosis treatment, will reduce the infectivity by 90% within 48 hours. So the most important step would be to diagnose the cases as early as possible and to start the treatment. Extrapulmonary tuberculosis and patients having pulmonary tuberculosis but are having sputum smear negative are minimal hazard to the community. So that's why earlier more focus was there on sputum smear positive cases so that we could break the chain of transmission. But now the guidelines are same for everyone. We want to treat all the patients. This we have seen. Okay. Incubation period. Generally, what we mean by incubation period is the time of entry of the infectious agent to the development of first sign or symptom. But as I've told you that tuberculosis is a little peculiar in this, that the entry of infectious agent might be there, and this infective agent may remain dormant or in the latent phase throughout life. Sometimes it gets activated and may manifest as disease. So to say it is difficult to derive the incubation period. So from time of receipt of infection to development of tuberculin test positive is 3 to 6 weeks. That is, our body starts responding after this much time. Thereafter, the disease development depends upon the closeness of the contact, extent of disease and sputum positivity of the source case, dose of infection, and the host immunity. The incubation period may range from weeks to years. Some of the host factors which can influence the occurrence of disease is the age. Most of the time, children and young adults, they get the exposure, and young adults are the ones which are having majority of the TB manifestation. Male to female ratio now is decreasing. Earlier it was more because many times males were going outside to earn for the family, and they were living in overcrowded conditions without any health facilities, without knowing the infective status of others, and they did not want to lose their wages, etc. So that's why there were more chances of disease in males earlier, but now the gap is decreasing. Still we see males are having higher numbers compared to females. Cellular immunity is little protective, otherwise antibodies are not that protective. If the person is having HIV infection, if there's a contact with the active case of sputum smear positive tuberculosis, if the person is having diabetes mellitus, if the occupation is such where there are more chances of silicosis or pneumoconic diseases, where the ventilation facilities are improper, alcohol abuse or drug users, people having malnutrition, people who are smoking, these are all at higher risk of developing tuberculosis. Institutional populations, if proper ventilation is not maintained, then higher chances of tuberculosis. People who are having end-stage renal disease or those who are having corticosteroid therapy, they are also at high risk of tuberculosis. So if we can identify such people, we should be having more keen interest in looking for the disease. Certain socio-environmental factors which tend to increase the chances of tuberculosis, like poor housing, poor ventilation and overcrowding, misbeliefs regarding the disease, irrational behavior in seeking treatment, lack of access to proper health care, and malnutrition. They can all increase the chances. And the root cause of all these is the poverty and ignorance. So if we can educate our society, as the literacy increases, as we can give better health education to the community, and if we can remove their myths that this is because of the curse of some previous life form, etc., etc., and if we can educate them that proper treatment is available, we might be able to reduce the disease problem. Now, this is how tuberculosis spreads from one person to another. When the person coughs, speaks, or sneezes, these droplets are formed, and when these droplets are inhaled in the form of fresh droplets or in the form of droplet nuclei, these droplets harboring the infectious Mycobacterium tuberculosis, they go inside the lungs, and there they remain dormant sometimes, which may activate as a disease later on. Now, if we know this is the agent, host, and environment, how should we go about finding the cases and how should we diagnose the condition? We should first see what are the signs and symptoms of the disease. So we say presumptive pulmonary tuberculosis if the person is having any of these symptoms, like cough for more than 2 weeks, if the person is having hemoptysis, that is blood in sputum, if the person is having fever for more than 2 weeks, if there is significant weight loss, and if any pulmonary abnormality is seen in chest radiograph. If any of these are there, then we should suspect tuberculosis and we should try to go for diagnosis. In addition, context of microbiologically confirmed TB patients, people living with HIV, diabetics, malnourished, cancer patients, patients on immunosuppressants or steroids, they should be regularly screened for signs and symptoms of tuberculosis. So in many programs now we have started with the integration. Like in HIV program, those who are screened for HIV, we simultaneously screen for tuberculosis. Likewise, in NTEP, patients who are diagnosed with tuberculosis, we try to find out other diseases also, which we suspect are higher in tuberculosis patients, like HIV, like diabetes, etc. So if suppose a person is having such symptoms, what shall we do? We can go for sputum smear microscopy, we can do culture, we can have rapid molecular diagnostic testing, and in many places drug sensitivity testing also. So it depends where the patient has gone. So if suppose in a patient in a OPD, in a general OPD, let's suppose in a dispensary, a patient comes having symptoms of cough for more than 2 weeks. The medical officer examines the person and he sends the patient to a microscopy center, DMC, designated microscopy center, or tuberculosis unit, which is nearby. Many times these DMCs or TUs are, placed inside these dispensaries or PSCs or district hospitals. Sometimes they are in a separate building. So at that place, person having presented TB will be asked to provide sputum for smear examination, and a chest X-ray would be done. So based on these two tests, there will be a combination having 4 possibilities, that the chest X-ray is suggestive and sputum is positive. Any patient who is having sputum smear positive will be labeled as a microbiologically confirmed TB case. So whether the X-ray is positive or negative, if sputum is having Mycobacterium bacilli which are detected on ZN staining or any other staining, it is microbiologically confirmed TB. If suppose the sputum smear is positive but chest X-ray negative, same condition, microbiologically positive. But if sputum smear is negative and chest X-ray is having findings of TB, then in such cases CBNAT will be done on the sputum. If smear is negative or not available and chest X-ray is non-suggestive of tuberculosis, then we have to see whether there is clinically high suspicion of tuberculosis. If yes, then we'll have CBNAT test again. So this is cartridge based nucleic acid amplification test, it is having higher sensitivity compared to sputum smear microscopy. So when we do this CBNet, we might be able to detect Mycobacterium tuberculosis and we might not be able to. If we detect Mycobacterium tuberculosis, we also get the result regarding rifampicin sensitivity, whether these bacilli are sensitive to rifampicin or not. So based on that, we can classify that the person is having rifampicin sensitive microbiologically confirmed tuberculosis, because for microbiologically confirmed, either the person is having sputum smear positivity or CBNet positivity. So we have directly seen the bacilli or the nucleic acid of the bacilli. Sometimes the mycobacterium which are detected may be having rifampicin resistance also. So such cases will be referred to rifampicin resistance management centers. If we are not sure about the rifampicin sensitivity, if the result is not that clear cut, we might repeat the CBNet on second sample, and based on that we can have rifampicin positive or negative, sensitive or resistant Mycobacterium tuberculosis, which is confirmed microbiologically. If MTB is not detected or CBNet results are not available, then we have to see if there's a possibility of any alternate diagnosis. If there's a possibility, we should try to find out the alternate diagnosis. And if there is no possibility of alternate diagnosis, we could rule out others. And there is clinical suspicion that the person is suffering from tuberculosis, then we might label it as clinically diagnosed tuberculosis. All presumptive TB cases should be offered HIV counseling and testing. However, diagnostic workup for TB must not be delayed. So we should try to, diagnose tuberculosis as possible as early, but simultaneously we should try to diagnose tuberculosis also, HIV also in such cases. This is the main diagnostic algorithm which we expect from you all to remember. This is given in most of your books. Likewise, for pediatric patients, there is a presumptive pediatric TB. So when do we suspect that? If there is persistent fever or cough for more than 2 weeks, if there is loss of weight or no weight gain within the last 3 months, and or history of contact with an infectious TB case. So history of unexplained weight loss or no weight gain in past 3 months, loss of weight is defined as loss of more than 5% body weight compared to the highest weight recorded in last 3 months. In a symptomatic child, contact with a person with any form of active TB within last 2 years may be considered as significant. The diagnostic algorithm is little different in case of children because the sputum is not that easily available in them. So what do? We first see whether the child is having such symptoms, persistent cough, fever or weight loss. If the history is positive, then we try to get sputum. If sputum is available, we directly do the CBNet testing. Because the specificity and sensitivity of CBNet is much more and the sample is precious for children. So on CBNet, if MTB is detected, then it is microbiologically confirmed TB case. But if the sputum is not available or if CBNet is not available, then in such cases, if the sputum is not available, because in such cases, we have to do tuberculin sensitivity testing and X-ray chest. If we see that chest X-ray is highly suggestive, then we should try to get the sputum. Either gastric aspiration can be done or induced sputum for CBNet. Then if we get the sample, we do the CBNet on that. We see whether it is positive or negative. And based on that, we can have either microbiologically confirmed TB or clinically diagnosed TB if there is no alternative diagnosis available. If chest X-ray is non-specific, shadows are seen, and tuberculin testing is also negative, then give a course of antibiotic. Then see if the shadows are still persistent. If yes, then again do the gastric aspiration or induce sputum and check through CBNet whether positive negative. If chest X-ray is normal and tuberculin sensitivity is positive, then we have to evaluate for extrapulmonary tuberculosis. If chest X-ray is normal and TST is also negative, then we have to look for alternate causes. So this is how we diagnose this. For extrapulmonary, we have to see what organ is involved, and depending upon that, we have to have a specimen from there and we can check it. The constitutional symptoms like weight loss and persistent fever might still be there even if cough is not there. And depending upon the various organs involved, they can be their specific presentations. Like if it is vertebra, then there can be some deformities in the spine. Lymph nodes might be enlarged, etc. So for extrapulmonary TB cases, presumptive EPTB case, appropriate specimen is taken from the site where we are suspecting tuberculosis. If that sample is available, we do the CBNet. CBNet can detect Mycobacterium tuberculosis and the sensitivity towards rifampicin. So microbiologically confirmed EPTB can be seen on that. If CBNet is not there, then liquid culture can be done, and then from the positive cultures we can see microbiologically confirmed EPTB. If the liquid culture is negative, then we can say the tuberculosis is not there. If specimen is not available and there is high clinical suspicion, use other diagnostic tools like CT scan, MRI, X-rays, and diagnose tuberculosis, or otherwise make an alternative diagnosis. This is the sensitivity and this is specificity. Sensitivity means ability of a test to detect the true positives. So if the sample is actually positive, then the CBNet will detect tuberculosis in 93% of cases in lymph node biopsy. For FNAC, 96% is the sensitivity. So you can see everywhere the sensitivity is very high. Even in HIV patients, sensitivity is higher. That's why CBNet is a preferred test. And with time, the number of facilities for CBNet is also increasing. At present, more than 3,500 CBNet labs are available in our country. So integrated drug resistant TB diagnosis algorithm we can leave as of now. There's a presumptive TB and all diagnosed cases. So in them, depending upon this, we can diagnose, but we can leave it for now. Now tuberculin test, how do we do that? There can be a short note also on tuberculin test, and very oftenly we ask in Vivas, what is tuberculin test, what is the significance, how it is being done. So the antigen which we use is 1 tuberculosis unit, which is 0.00002 part protein derivative. WHO advocates PPD RT23 between 80. This is the antigen for tuberculin test. The evidence of past or recent infection by M tuberculosis can be detected by this. The only means of estimating prevalence of infection is Montoux testing. We don't have any other test which can tell whether the infection is there or not. For disease we have like CBNet, microscopy, examination, etc. But for infection we don't have any other test apart from Montoux test. So 1 tuberculosis unit of PPD in 0.1 ml of fluid is given intradermally on flexor surface of the forearm. And then we check the induration and erythema after 72 hours. And we see the transverse horizontal diameter of the induration. Induration is the hardening beneath the skin. We measure it, we mark it with a ball pen, and then we check the diameter. If it is more than 10 mm, we call it as tuberculin positive test. If it is less than 6 mm, we call it as tuberculin negative test. Between 6 to 9 mm, we call it as doubtful. Culture is useful to confirm the diagnosis in smear negative patients, but takes 6 weeks on Algae medium. But liquid cultures are a little faster. But we are not using culture usually for diagnosis nowadays. It's the diagnosis is based on sputum smear examination, chest X-ray, and CBNet. Direct microscopic examination through Zeal-Nielsen staining is one of the most important, easy, and quick tests available, having limited sensitivity of 50 to 78%, but specificity of virtually 100%. So that's why we are still sticking to direct microscopy. We need at least 10 raised to power. Here it is written 5, but we have seen in different books it is written differently. So at least there has to be 10,000 bacilli per ml of sputum for this sputum to come as positive for microscopy. Otherwise, if less than 10,000 bacilli are there per ml, we might not be able to detect the presence of bacilli. Earlier we were doing 3 sputum sample examinations, but now we are not doing 3. Maximum we are doing 2 sputum smear examinations. There are certain newer methods available like nitrate reductase assay, molecular assay, line probe assay, LED fluorescent microscopy, liquid culture, automated expert, MTB, or gene expert. The good thing about CBNet or gene expert is that it detects the bacilli within 2 hours, and it also gives us the higher sensitivity in HIV negative patients, HIV infected patients, which are generally sputum smear negative, but this can increase it by 45%. It also provides whether the bacilli are rifampicin sensitive or resistant. So these are the tests which are endorsed under National Tuberculosis Elimination Program now, and all other tests have been banned. Now coming to control. When we talk about control, there are generally 3 levels of prevention: primary prevention, secondary prevention, and tertiary prevention. In primary prevention, there are 2 modes of intervention: health promotion and specific protection. So if you see BCG vaccination, this is an example of specific protection. And all the vaccines are examples of specific protection because they are specifically protecting a person against a specific disease. Chemoprophylaxis is also a kind of specific protection. So what else can come in the primary prevention? Good nutrition, proper housing and ventilation, they are part of primary prevention. In secondary prevention comes the early diagnosis and treatment. So early detection and starting on domiciliary treatment. This is part of your secondary level of prevention. Then case holding and follow-up, that is identifying the person, starting with the tuberculosis treatment and then following up the treatment for the required duration. This can be part of your secondary level as well as tertiary level, because during the treatment Person might develop some kind of reactions, some kind of disabilities, complications. And disability limitation and rehabilitation are as such part of your tertiary level of prevention. So these two can be part of your tertiary prevention. Now BCG vaccination, very important topic again for your Viva. This vaccine is a live attenuated vaccine having Danish strain 1331. In neonates, that is up to 28 days, the dose is 0.05 ml, and above 1 month of age till 1 year of age, the dose is 0.1 ml intradermally. The vaccine comes in a lyophilized form, that is freeze-dried powder is there in a vial. And this is the amber colored vial because direct sunlight might harm the bacilli, and this is a live bacilli. So we keep it under refrigeration, and normal saline is the diluent. So 1 ml of normal saline is added to this vial after opening the seal from the top. Then we gently mix the powder with the normal saline, and the solution is ready for vaccination. We use special needles and special syringes for giving the BCG vaccination. We withdraw the required amount, and on the insertion of the deltoid on the left shoulder, we give the vaccination. When we are giving the vaccination, we can know whether your injection technique was correct or not. So if there is bleb formation which is more than 5 millimeters in diameter, your injection technique is good. Generally 5 to 8 millimeters bleb is raised, having an orange peel appearance, almost yellowish in color. This disappears within half an hour, and after some weeks there is a papule formation on the site of injection. This papule converts into a nodule by 6 weeks, and then it breaks into a shallow ulcer. Majority of time it breaks into an ulcer, and sometimes it might subside from the nodule itself. So this ulcer generally heals by 12 weeks. If it does not heal by 12 weeks, INH local dressing can be done, but I haven't seen any person having open ulcer after 3 months. So this ulcer, once it gets healed, leaves a scar, and this scar can be identified on the left shoulder. So it is just by convention that we are giving it on left shoulder. There is no scientific basis apart from this, except that when we are asking whether the person has received the vaccine or not, we can check it physically on the left shoulder. If the scar is present, we can assume that the person has received BCG vaccination. So some instructions are to be given to the mother while giving the vaccine, that this is an intradermal vaccine. We generally do not clean the site with spirit. We just clean it with sterile cotton which has been boiled and dried. So we're not using any disinfectant, first thing. Secondly, mother should not apply pressure on the site of injection. Otherwise, generally this is a common practice that when injection needle is removed at the site of puncture, the patients or the receiver tend to put a finger on that so that no bleeding happens. But as this is a intradermal vaccine, the vaccine might come out of the puncture wound if pressure is applied. So nothing is to be applied, and the mother has to be reassured that nothing will happen except for this normal sequence where papule will be formed, It will convert into nodule, then it will break and an ulcer will be formed, and there is nothing to worry about this. The efficacy of BCG vaccine is 0 to 80%. 0 to 80%, this is a little confusing. So it might not be preventing the occurrence of disease, but the most important part why we are giving is that it reduces the chances of miliary tuberculosis or disseminated tuberculosis. So severity of disease decreases definitely. And of course, it reduces the chance of transmission also. So I think we can stop here, and rest of the things will be covered in the next class, where you will come to know about the National Tuberculosis Elimination Program, its strategies, and what kind of drugs we are giving, at what place they are being given. Okay. Any questions if you have, you can send it to me. So now we can wind up. Thank you.